Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Trollhunters Tales of Arcadia. Okay, so this episode in the Hall of the Gumm-Gumm King is essentially Gunmar wins. That's essentially what the episode is. So, yeah, the episode kind of is kind of an arc that has been building for the better part of the past 12 episodes, where we've already established Jim being on trial, Gunmar secretly playing the sneak of the troll market. That has been a thing that has been building for the better part of the season, and now it's finally, come to a head in this episode. So this episode, of course, starts off with Jim being revealed to actually have survived his adventure in the deep. I believe there's a book that goes into further detail about what happened down there, but essentially Jim goes on an adventure in the deep, and he returns to the Hero's Forge to hear a massive speech from Usurna. And Usurna, obviously, is, due to her true loyalties to Gunmar, then proceeds to create this entire propaganda speech to make the Trollhunters specifically look bad. And so she starts off with the idea that, of course, he obviously has set loose Gun. He obviously tries to claim that the Trollhunter is dead, and obviously was corrupt, but also proceeds to frame him for Vendel's murder, when he was in a cage the entire time, and nobody in their right mind would actually believe he actually murdered Vendel. But of course, everybody just kind of buys everything Usurna is saying, and she claims that with Vendel gone, she will take his place in Trollmarket and usher in a new age of unity underneath one leader, which of course is suspicious, considering we now know she serves Gunmar, but Nobody else seems to understand that. Nobody else has since caught on yet, and everybody believes that this has got to be the greatest thing ever, being united under one leader and uniting all of their troll kind. Which, of course, while Jim, of course, now kind of suspects the truth, and realizing and proceeds to kind of escape back over to Vendel's workshop. Meanwhile, Blinky is holding Vendel's staff and is visibly and has reunited all of his friends around Vendel to kind of mourn his loss, but with Vendel, of course, pointing out that it was not his time, and wonders why Vendel should be the one to go. But of course, among his remains, Blinky winds up finding an Amnesia stone, and realizing that Vendel used his last moments to record who attacked him, which is essentially how the Amnesia stone works. It essentially records a hologram of what happened before the person died. And of course, Blinky quickly realizes that they can use this to determine who Vendel's attacker was, and wonder what Vendel was trying to tell them before he died. And of course, Blinky can only watch in horror as he watches Vendel get murdered by Usurna, very graphically. And of course, very disturbed by what he saw, but also realizing now what happened. Blinky now realizes that Vendel never trusted Usurna and was suspected that she was evil all along. So that of course, and of course, Jim. It's this point where Jim walks in, having seen this entire thing, and now realizing that Usurna's true intentions. That explains what he saw about how he saw Usurna try to turn Trollmarket turn Trollmarket against him. And of course, everybody's visibly surprised by how Jim is there, with Clara pulling him into a hug, wondering how he got out of the deep, pointing out no troll is able to escape, but he just calmly explains he's not a troll, so it doesn't really apply to him. But in case now wondering what Jim was talking about, Blinky then asks what he knows. Then asks Jim what he knows, and Jim proceeds to explain that he saw Usurna get this big ass speech about how she's uniting everybody, about how she's planning to unite everybody under one banner, and quickly realizes that Gunmar, that she's most likely preparing them for Gunmar. But it's at this point where obviously they realize that they need to figure out where Gunmar is and stop him before he can successfully take over. If Usurna is in fact the one pulling the strings and letting him out. And so this point where Toby actually posits a theory that he's most likely at the Janus Order, pointing out that they, set up the entire thing for his return. But in case it is at this point where they go down into the Janus Order base, and of course we find out that Arg has apparently eaten one of Toby's breakfast burritos because he has a little bit of gas. But they have ultimately arrived in the base only to discover it not only completely deserted but also completely destroyed. They're gearing up for this big battle, and there's nobody here, and that disturbs them greatly. And of course, Clara wonders what exactly could have happened, and Toby optimistically claims that he hopes it's some sort of Halloween party because he doesn't like the alternative. But in case, they proceed to slowly snake their way through the base when Jim ultimately hears Strickler talking, and a little confused, he proceeds to suggest that they split up and to cover more ground. So they proceed to do that and break off into groups so that they can actually, find out where Gunmar is and what's going on. And ultimately, Jim discovers the media room where he sees Strickler, back when he was still part of the Janus Order, giving the whole orientation speech that Gunmar didn't really bother to watch as in a previous episode. But of course, as Jim is kind of going through and trying to figure out what's going on, he does hear Strickler on the screen, and let's point out, and here he is, Gunmar the Black, the Dark Underlord. At which point, Gunmar himself shows up, or so everybody thinks. Jim immediately calls for his friends, and of course everybody comes to Jim's aid, and working together, they do proceed to face off against Gunmar, who proceeds to try and attack them. And ultimately, through their combined efforts, they are ultimately able to bring Gunmar down, although it winds up being way too easy since Jim isn't using the Eclipse armor and is able to kill Gunmar in a single blow. At which point it's revealed that it's not actually Gunmar he killed, but actually Otto. And of course, it's revealed that in actuality, Gunmar used Otto's polymorph abilities to make a duplicate of himself to trick Jim, and then insisting why use Otto. Jim demands to know why Gunmar won't face him directly. At which point Gunmar ominously states through Otto that he already has what he wants, as Otto is ultimately let free of Gunmar's control and realizing and ultimately dies. So yeah, Otto unfortunately does not get a good ending. He as he shouldn't. He's a villain, but the fact that Jim was kind of right, that's kind of been a thing that's been building. Like just the idea that Gunmar did not treat the changelings like equals, and ultimately did not care for their loyalty, and ultimately just killed them all. So yeah, and then obviously Otto as the leader kind of had the worst fate, facing off against Jim as a phony Gunmar before being killed unceremoniously. So and of course this makes Jim realize that they never should have left Trollmarket, and now realizes what the true plan is. And of course they're too late to get back to Trollmarket, as Usurna then reveals that they are going to reunite, that to Trollmarket that they're going to reunite under one leader. That leader being someone that she claims is far greater than herself, and then reintroduces everybody to Gunmar, who she declares is now the new Underlord of Trollmarket. And of course, Bork is the first person to kind of openly defy Gunmar, pointing out that Trollmarket will never actually join under him. At which point Gunmar tells her that if she's not going to kneel, then he'll make her kneel. At which point he uses his Decimar blade to turn her into a Gumm-Gumm soldier against her will. And of course, is this point where Gunmar then declares that they could either join her in her fate either willingly or as mindless puppets. And he declares that when he retakes the surface lands, they can either do it together or they'll kneel to him. And of course, everybody immediately tries to evacuate. Gato is the only one who's kind of successful because he's using an astral projection. He's not really physically there. He's not worried about anything. He's just not worried about anything. He just leaves. But everybody else, not so lucky. Essentially, Usurna starts locking down all of the exits so that nobody can leave. Unfortunately, she isn't able to capture everyone for Gunmar, but she is able to capture a good percentage of Trollmarket, and they ultimately wind up getting, you know, turned into Gumm-Gumm soldiers off screen. But we don't see it, but we hear their screams and terror as Gunmar just kind of rounds them all up. But in case, Jim immediately arrives back in Trollmarket with his team and quickly discovers the issue that's going on, that Gunmar has started recruiting his Gumm-Gumm soldiers, and quickly realizing that they need to figure out what's going on. They immediately start looking for Dictatious, who has since sent Droll to go and try and find his brother somewhere, because he knows because he's pretty sure Blinky is somewhere in Trollmarket somewhere. Meanwhile, he's using a Gumm-Gumm soldier as a seeing eye dog, which because of course he can't see himself anymore. But in case, it's at this point where he winds up getting captured by Team Trollhunter, and they proceed to tie him up and interrogate him with in a bit of a delicious irony, where, you know, he's tied up the exact same way he tied up Blinky back earlier in the season. And of course, Blinky does indeed try to gloat in the irony, pointing out that it's not so fun when it's the shoes on the other foot. But it's at this point where of course Blinky tries to plead, where Dictatious tries to plead with Blinky, trying to call him his brother, but of course Blinky proceeds to tell Dictatious that the only person he considers a brother has died, and his name was Vendel. And it's at this point where Jim then reintroduces himself to Dictatious, who obviously is convinced that Jim should be dead, and when he hears them, he's actually bewildered that they're not. So, but in case it's at this point where Jim demands to know of Dictatious what their plans ultimately are for Trollmarket, and of course wonders why Gunmar would attack Trollmarket in the first place. And Dictatious then proceeds to point out the obvious: most of Gunmar's army is still trapped in the Darklands and didn't come out with him. So unfortunately, he needs to rebuild his armies, which means using his Decimar blade on a bunch of innocent trolls to convert them. And now realizing that ultimately now that they need to stop Gunmar, but Dictatious adds that they're not going to be able to do that either, claiming that now that Gunmar's in Trollmarket, he has access to a Heartstone and can use it to revitalize himself. And points out that now that he's at his full strength, nobody can hope to face him. And at which point Jim and his team realize that the only other alternative they have now is to get as many of their friends out of Trollmarket as they can. Obviously, they're not going to be able to, you know, succeed in saving everybody, because, you know, Gunmar's converted quite a few people at this point. But they do point out that it can do as much as they can. At which point, Clara volunteers to use a portal to pull everybody out of Trollmarket. But Blinky proceeds to explain that is actually a really bad idea. As he explains, she has never actually opened a portal that big, and also explains that if she opens a portal for too long, it could corrupt her soul or even kill her. So for that reason, he opts that they find an alternative way. At which point, Toby proceeds to suggest that they potentially use the gyre to get everybody out, pointing out that Blinky knows how to drive it, he knows all the tunnels and how to get in and out of places, and points out that it's probably their best opportunity to sneak everybody out. And of course, Blinky points out that is in fact a perfect idea, so he proceeds to send Jim on a bit of a stealth mission to go and round up everybody he can, send them through the tunnels to the gyre, and then he'll use the gyre station to just funnel everybody out. Meanwhile, as Jim is doing that, Usurna brings Gunmar to the Heartstone and tells it, and of course he proceeds to marvel at the beauty and all the raw energy that it provides. And of course, Usurna proceeds to explain to him that he should absolutely take his fill, pointing out that Trollmarket is his, nobody's going to stop him. So, of course, he proceeds to do exactly that and places his hand on the Heartstone before slowly sucking it dry of his energy and causing the Heartstone to slowly turn black. And of course, everybody who's still currently not under Gumm-Gumm control does see this and starts to lose despair. At which point, Jim shows up and starts rescuing people and sending them to the gyre station. But in any case, the plan does work for a while. Of course, Jim just kind of giving Blinky a phone so that they can communicate, and just funneling everybody into the gyre, with Blinky explaining that it will take multiple trips because the gyre only has so many free spots to go in. But ultimately, he does start funneling people into the tunnels, but quickly discovers the problem. There is a lot of daylight in between where they're trying to go and where they want to go. Ultimately, what happens is the plan is to bring everybody into the forest where it's nice and shady, but there's a big sun patch in the middle of where they can go, and they can't get into the forest. At which point, Blinky, quickly assessing the problem, calls Jim and lets him know what's going on, about how nobody can escape the troll market anymore, because their way is unfortunately blocked by sunlight, and pointing out that they can't escape until nightfall. He proceeds to explain that they may have to postpone their escape. But Jim explains that if they wait until nightfall, that ultimately they'll be found. At which point he tells Blinky to sit tight because he'll call somebody that he knows can help. At which point he proceeds to call probably one of the least likely people he will ever officially call, Steve. Steve, of course, is in the middle of a gym class, and the last class of the day, based on the fact that it becomes nightfall by the end of the episode. But of course, and also it's interesting that Jim has Steve on speed dial. Not sure when that happened, but it is showing that they probably did exchange numbers at some point and have started to become sort of ish friends. But of course, Steve proceeds to pick it up, asking if Jim if he wants to admit that if he's as much of a loser as Steve thinks he is. And of course, Jim proceeds to tell Steve that he knows Steve knows. And of course, Steve proceeds to claim that he doesn't know what Jim's talking about, but Jim proceeds to explain that Steve knows exactly what Jim's talking about. And when Steve points out that maybe that he does realize that Jim does in fact know what he's talking about, but then proceeds to pretend that maybe he doesn't. Maybe he needs to have it explained to him. At which point Jim proceeds to explain that he knows Steve saw him in his armor, and knows that Steve knows he's the troll hunter, and realizing that why Jim is calling him and that he does in fact need Jim's help. He then asks Jim what they need, and Jim proceeds to explain that they're trying to organize an escape route, but they've encountered a problem with sunlight, and that they need something to protect them from the sunlight. Blankets, umbrellas, anything they can find. And of course, Steve is obviously a little confused, trying to rack his brain for what he can find. But then he discovers a poster for Stomping in the Rain, and realizing that yes, umbrellas are in fact a good idea. He then declares that he's on it, and then with class officially wrapping up, or not, the alternative is that Steve and Eli wound up cutting class, which not great. He proceeds to tell Eli that it's time for some creep saving time, which of course. And with that, the two of them then proceed to go immediately to the tunnel where Jim is trying to organize the evacuation. And of course, Steve and Eli, having been texted a location by Jim, then proceed to arrive at the old tunnel. And of course, the trolls are hesitant to trust Steve at first because he's a human. But Steve proceeds to take an umbrella from Eli, claiming that they come in peace. And proceeds to hand one to Bagdwella, who, after realizing she'll be safe under it, then proceeds to take it and thanks him. Of course, Steve responding that it's no trouble, but also doesn't really know whether to call Bagdwella a man or a woman, because troll biology hard. They look like that. That's the unfortunate problem. Bagdwella it's either. Because trolls are very big and bulky. That's, I guess, the best explanation for that. It's just that Steve can't tell. Steve genuinely can't tell because he's never seen a troll before. That's the best explanation for that. But in any case, the other trolls, after seeing Bagdwella take one and be completely fine, all begin to slowly trust Steve and do file out single file with Steve bringing the umbrellas back so that they can continue to rescue people. And of course, with that they do the pileup does proceed to kind of clean up a little bit, and Blinky is able to bring more trolls in and out of Troll Market. Unfortunately, it's around this point where Usurna kind of figures out what they're planning, because Usurna ultimately discovers Dictatious tied up in Blinky's library, and demanding to know what happened, Dictatious proceeds to explain that the Trollhunter's alive and is currently trying to organize an escape of Trollmarket. And of course, Usurna is angered by the fact that Jim survived, and insists that they need to tell the Dark Underlord immediately. But of course, Dictatious points out why that's actually a really bad idea, pointing out that obviously Gunmar at this point thinks Jim is dead and would be very pissed off if he were interrupted to find out that he was not. And of course, obviously Gunmar is both draining the Heartstone and recruiting people and forcibly recruiting people for his army. So he's obviously a little bit busy at the moment. And Usurna, realizing that what would ultimately happen to her if Gunmar found out she failed, does decide that they'll keep it under wraps, and goes and proceeds to assemble an army to go and find out where they're escaping from, telling everybody to seal all the exits. And of course it is at this point where as they're ultimately filing the last of the people into the gyre, they discover the possessed Droll trying to attack them. And of course, he immediately tries to barge into the gyre station, but Arg proceeds to use his Horngazzle to seal the door closed at Blinky's request. At which point they realize they need to file everybody onto the gyre, but discover that the gyre station has been closed down and they can't escape that way anymore. But of course, they realizing that they have no way out, and it's only a matter of time before the Gumm-Gumm soldiers burst the door down. Clara decides to ultimately go with her original plan, which is to summon a massive portal to pull everybody out. And of course, once again, Blinky insists that that's way too dangerous, and she can't do that. But she insists that ultimately that she wanted to, because she's been trying to repay Jim back for saving her brother from the Darklands. Pointing out that Jim saved her brother, helping save him is the least she can do. At which point she proceeds to use her staff to try and summon a massive portal, but in keeping with Blinky's warnings, she does in fact slowly start dying. Like it starts like all of her veins start turning black. Her eyes kind of turn black. She starts coughing, and of course, quickly realizing that his girlfriend is dying, Jim immediately runs up and takes the staff, pointing out that she's not alone and that he'll help. At which point, everybody else from Team Trollhunter piles in. Arg, Blinky, and Toby all join in to help summon the portal. With Blinky ultimately declaring something that Jim said earlier, that they're stronger together. And of course, with that, they proceed to summon a massive portal to pull everybody out of the gyre station and into the forest where they're safe. And with that, they are ultimately able to successfully get everybody away from Trollmarket. At which point Dictatious and is able to get through the door with Droll's help, and leading Usurna and the rest of the Gumm-Gumm army in. He starts looking around, but since he's blind, he starts to realize that they're not actually in the room and that everybody escaped. And of course, this causes Usurna to become very angry because she's upset that the Trollhunter was managed to escape her with several of the members of Trollmarket, and that their takeover of Trollmarket wasn't as seamless as it should have been. But ultimately declaring that it ultimately won't matter because they'll ultimately find them anyway, she proceeds to declare that the Trollmarket is ultimately under Gunmar's rule anyway. She doesn't care. They'll deal with that later. But in any case, with that, everybody then proceeds to celebrate the fact that they made it out of Trollmarket, with Jim proceeding to thank Steve and Eli for their help, and of course, Steve proceeds to point out that Jim just owes them big time, with Eli adding that they could start by answering a couple hundred questions. And of course, Jim admits that yes, he will in fact talk to them later about any questions they have about trolls and everything else. So with that, everybody is very, very visibly happy. But now they realize now Blinky points out that without Vendel, who's going to lead them? At which point Jim takes up Vendel's staff, and of course then proceeds to offer it to Blinky, saying that it's his staff now. And of course, Blinky is initially reluctant to accept such a high honor, But it's at this point where all of the other trolls in Trollmarket bow in respect to him. And realizing that they've ultimately chosen who their new leader will be, he graciously accepts the opportunity to be their new elder. At which point, he declares that now that he's leader of Trollmarket, he declares that for right now they've managed to escape from Gunmar, but that ultimately they are going to have to make tracks to get as far away from Trollmarket as possible because Gunmar is still living down there. At which point, he declares that ultimately they'll wait until midnight. And then under the cover of darkness, they'll leave to go find their new home. And with that, everybody just kind of is happy about the fact that they've lived to see another day. But obviously, Gunmar now takes on a new form. He is now Gunmar the Golden, at least from what the novels claim. Like in the novels, he gets a new title called Gunmar the Golden to reference, his unique golden color that he takes on after revitalizing himself. So. Yeah, I'm gonna call him Gunmar the Golden because that's what the book canon establishes. But we'll get to the books. We'll get to some things about the books later, way later. We're not there yet, but there are some things I need to discuss about the books at a point. But that point is not now. But in any case, with that, Gunmar now has his armies, but ultimately, we're introduced to one final twist. First and foremost, Jim, after rescuing everybody from Trollmarket, returns home to discover Strickler and Nomura helping themselves to his mom's coffee. And of course, confused as to what they're doing in his house, Strickler then proceeds to explain that he understands that Gunmar has taken over Trollmarket and does realize that Jim is likely going to need some additional help before he's able to take on Gunmar. And meanwhile, Claire is asleep in her house when she suddenly bolts upright awake and is visibly not Claire. Her eyes turn a translucent gold, and she proceeds to wander off, God knows, into a vault inside Trollmarket, where all the remains of their enemies are kept. And eventually combing through it, she discovers the petrified head of Anger Rot, and then proceeds to bring it back to the exact same place where Anger Rot had appeared all those many years ago, and offers the head to Anger Rot, and her dialogue is notably very stiff. And at which point we hear a familiar voice. At which point we find out that Clara is actually face to face with Morgana herself. So yeah, we haven't seen Morgana yet, but she does finally make her first full appearance in this episode. And it is revealed, and she's kind of covered in shadow and golden light. So her face is somewhat obscured by it, but we can ultimately see what she looks like. Finally, we have a full design for her. And of course, Morgana proceeds to thank Claire for bringing her the head of her champion. At which point, she proceeds to tell Claire that from now onward, their souls are linked now and forevermore. At which point, Claire bolts upright in bed, thinking it was all a nightmare. So yeah, that's where the season ultimately ends. Obviously, Gunmar takes over Trollmarket, and the trolls are forced to find a new home going into this next season. But also, I found out that Strickler and Nomura are back and are here to help Jim, so he has more allies to rely on now. That was an arc that had been building for a while. They're back finally to help Jim take on Gunmar. So they kind of just been floating around in the background and kind of just been in hiding. Now they're back. And of course, more importantly, Claire has her soul has been ultimately what Blinky said about Claire's staff ultimately came to pass. She has ultimately been possessed by Morgana and is under her control because of her use of the staff in such a massive way. But of course, ultimately, this is a fitting way to end the season. And this is something I did want to kind of talk about. Obviously, we've talked about the Troll Tribunal a bit. And ultimately, this is something I've wanted to talk about for a bit with this season and this arc. Because this entire arc of Gunmar taking over Trollmarket while Jim is MIA is ultimately the Tribunal's fault. Ultimately, they were too scared of Gunmar. They were arrogant to assume he could not escape Trollmarket. and ultimately arrogant enough to listen to Usurna, who obviously, now with the revelation that she's been working for Gunmar the entire time, ultimately misled them into thinking that Jim was an enemy and that he needed to be disposed of. And now the entire Troll Tribunal is realizing that that was a mistake. They should not have thrown away their only source of protection, and the fact that Jim is able to summon the Eclipse Blade, something no other one of his predecessors has done before. And you can ultimately see that, yeah, they were arrogant enough to assume that they didn't need Jim. They thought that they could deal with Gunmar by themselves, but ultimately they could not. And as the series has established in season 1, arrogance is what gets you killed. Case in point, the Troll Tribunal kind of just got themselves in a bit of a bind where they ultimately helped Gunmar take over Trollmarket. It's entirely their fault. That was the entire arc that the series has been building to. And yeah, ultimately this season has a theme of arrogance about it. Everybody thought they were in the right. Everybody did everything they thought was right. But ultimately, Usurna played on their fears and arrogance about Gunmar and being able to deal with him. And they ultimately paid the price for it in the terms of Trollmarket. Trollmarket got taken over by Gunmar. Now he's Dark Underlord of Trollmarket, and has rebuilt his armies using the unfortunate citizens who were living there. So yeah, that's the big arc that just paid off in this season. And ultimately, going into this next season, probably the big season that they're building to, because now with Gunmar having rebuilt his armies, he's now going to try and bring about the Eternal Night, and that's what the next arc is. Them figuring out how to stop it. So yeah, that is going to be a fun season to go over, because there's a lot of parts of that, and ultimately there's a lot of foreshadowing that pays off in that season as well. But also a new change of mantle for the Troll Hunter. We'll get to that. That's unfortunately, but that's going to be the next season. But for right now, that's going to do it for Troll Hunters. So thank you guys so much for watching this review. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Keep up to date with things like that. It's also another way to see my YouTube videos. If you don't see them in your sub boxes for whatever reason, go check that out. And also be sure to go and check out my Twitch. I stream Saturdays and Sundays. Please go check that out. I would appreciate that. Go do that. Be sure to go and check out my Discord. Link is down in the description. We are going to be doing a movie watch along relatively soon, so please go check that out. This weekend, in fact. If you guys are seeing this at the time it goes up, we're doing a watch along this weekend. If not, you missed it. If you didn't see it before that, you missed it. Also be sure and go and check out my what is it? Go check out my Patreon. It helps support me. I would appreciate that. And also be sure to go and check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video, whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!